Hi, I'm your host Vasco Duarte. Welcome to the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, where we share tips and tricks from Scrum Masters around the world. Every day, we bring you inspiring answers to important questions that all Scrum Masters face day after day. Hello everybody, welcome to our Wednesday Leading Change episode, this week with Doug Rabow. Hey Doug, welcome back.
It's great to be here.
So Doug, on Wednesdays we talk about change leadership, as I like to call it. And of course, we want to learn of one process, a change process you were involved with, and describe that for us. What were the steps? What were the key aspects of that change process? And as you go through that description, highlight the tools, the tips, the tricks, and the techniques you learned back then that you still apply today.
Awesome. So yeah, I got really lucky, and I'll pivot here just a little bit from my Scrum Master duties. Some of my duties extend into the operations management world as well. We had a really interesting problem to solve for, which is that as long as I had worked for this company, we really never had any visibility to work in progress. It was just incredibly challenging trying to find out what was actually getting worked on at any given time. Involved having basically people going around and interviewing other teams in a management function. And what we typically found, and one thing that I'll kind of add to this conversation, we were doing our planning in PowerPoint. The extent to which it was divorced from what was actually happening in the tool, ultimately if you're planning in a different place than where the work is actually getting done, from what I've experienced more often than not, you're going to end up with a huge disconnect. So what I was able to do and working with our teams, and I'll go into a bunch of detail about this, but basically we were able to build the reporting out of JIRA, out of the tool itself, to actually drive visibility to work in progress. So one of the ideas that I actually love that I leverage that I think is so important, and it comes directly from manufacturing and from Lean, is the idea of an and-on board. So people may be familiar with this idea in manufacturing where basically there's this big board that everybody can see in the manufacturing facility that gives you basically the current state of all the processes that are happening within the facility so that anybody can go up and they can look at the health of work in progress. And what's so interesting about that isn't the board itself. That means that we actually have to get the process to generate information that would actually populate that board. And for me, that's the really important learning. What we want to do, and the best way to get visibility to work in progress, is to actually get the work itself to generate the data that you're going to use about what's getting worked on. So the first big step for us in JIRA was to put lightweight governance in. So great quote, I'm going to forget the gentleman's name, but off of LinkedIn, light process facilitates calm. Chaos, we should never normalize chaos. And so what we were able to do in JIRA is just really, really light governance. What we said is all task stories, bugs, all need to have a parent epic. And that parent epic, just really high level, because lots of different teams doing different kinds of work, it should represent a body of work towards doing a thing. We did as well actually manage to implement. So what we did as part of this is we did start asking contractors, because we have a fairly large contractor pool, to start allocating their time at the epic level. So we were able to get actually really strong financial governance, really strong financial accountability as part of this process as well, without having to do time tracking. It really was at the level of, hey, just take the bodies of work, the initiatives that you're working on, and allocate your time at a high level to those things. And as part of that, we almost fully automated our financial management process. It's a couple hours a month to pull reports. It's another concept we can reference from Lean. I actually don't know if it comes directly from Lean or if it's an adaptation, but the idea of pull reporting, when we can get the process itself to generate the information, then all you have to do at any given moment of time is you can go in, you can pull a report without having to do any administration and find out what the current state of the process is. So some of the important things to go along with this is you need some sort of a framework that the department operates within in terms of when those statuses are going to get updated. So when we start talking about updating epic statuses, things like that. That stuff's not going to happen on an ongoing basis. So we certainly want to recognize, hey, we've got a monthly steer co meeting, or if we are doing some version of PI planning, it's prior to PI planning that there's a checkpoint where we know all of these statuses are going to get updated. They're going to be accurate. People know they need to go in and do those tasks. And yeah, literally total visibility to every initiative that was being worked on, allowed our product owners and leadership team to quickly identify anytime something popped up that wasn't prioritized and shouldn't be worked on. And as soon as you're managing for really a department of more than 100 people, that's when this scale really starts to become a problem. Getting that visibility of how do we have decentralized decision making, but still have visibility to everything that's getting worked on so we can have that level of oversight, was just a hugely successful initiative. And again, at the end of the day, it was just about turning everything into a list and assigning categories to it.
So I'm curious about how you got the actual governance to work as well as the updates to happen reliably. I guess this is one of the things that many of our listeners will probably struggle with over time, that a lot of things don't get updated, and then people will have arguments and discussions about whose job it is to update what and so on. How did you get an organization, a whole organization, to actually reliably update that information? And how did you create that, I think you called it light governance, to make sure that it was actually being updated and the information was being used?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things I should definitely mention as well, part of what made this so successful is it was developed hand in hand with the people who actually do the work. So I was very fortunate to be able to lead this initiative. But in terms of actually figuring out, how do we build this structure in JIRA? How is this going to align with our work? There was a handful of our Scrum Masters who'd been working with the organization for a long enough period of time that they were part of this change group. Every single step of the way, it was, this is the problem we're trying to solve for, considering multiple solution paths, and finding a way that we could just make this simple. And what we ended up with, and like I said, it really just amounted down to making sure that everything had an epic, and that our epics were related to a body of work that was getting worked on. What we actually found is that when we went to roll this out to the teams and they were aware that, something was coming, the overwhelming feedback that we got was, oh, we were so nervous that this was going to be some big, complicated, bureaucratic thing. This is incredibly simple. We can absolutely do that. So always a focus on, pressure testing all of your ideas. If you are in the operations management sort of position where you get the opportunity to build process, what I would absolutely encourage is you need to do it hand in hand with the people doing the work. You need to have an understanding of how the work actually executes, and you need to pressure test your ideas. If the feedback coming from the team is this isn't going to work and these are the reasons why this isn't going to work, you need to either come up with a solution to solve for those problems, or you need to be willing to go back to the drawing board and come up with a completely different solution.
And involve the people also in creating that different solution.
Absolutely. And the one thing that you have to be a little bit careful with, at least what I've found success with, is if you start with too big of a group, things are really unproductive to start with. You kind of need to have that smaller group of a core group of change people who are going to set the initial vision. And then as we roll this out with the teams is where you're going to get that more granular feedback. You're going to make changes and small adaptations to what you originally thought based on different contexts, different edge cases. So it really is just about going out, solving problems, listening to the team members. And it's funny, we talk about all the time how change is hard. My experience, when we build things that actually make it easier for the people doing the work and genuinely makes things better, there's very little pushback from a change perspective. But the real key is getting their buy-in. Buy-in's the wrong word. As I hear myself say that, it's not about buy-in. People will buy in, and I think that's the point, if it makes sense and if it's going to work. Where I think we get into a lot of trouble with process and change management is when we ignore that feedback. When the team members are going, this is not going to execute, you go, no, that's the plan, where this is how we're doing it. That's really been at the heart of the success of this. Now, as far as actually getting people to update the information, I think that's just such an important thing to be cognizant of. People are not going to update the information. That is the first problem you're going to have with any sort of system like this. So generally speaking, there needs to be some sort of regular cadence for reporting, especially when we're talking about things at the epic level. The last stage of this is if you have an enterprise level with JIRA, you can actually map your epics back to an initiative. So if you have platform teams and streamline teams, you can actually link everything to a parent initiative and see all the different epics from the different teams that are part of that initiative. So whether it is a monthly steerco session that you have, whether it's some version of a PI planning that you do every 2 months, generally speaking, the onus for us has fallen on the Scrum Masters. Hey, just make sure, all of your epics have the correct statuses. We'll set up a board for them just so they can only see their epics on the board, so they can very clearly see, what's in a to-do status, what's in an in-progress status. I think part of it as well is not getting too granular. When you start trying to pick things apart at too detailed of a level, it just becomes impossible to maintain. So the other thing that I would encourage people is to always look at any sort of reporting, any sort of information that's generated from the perspective of how are we going to use this information to make a decision, and then inform the level of detail that you go to only be granular enough to help you make that decision, but no more granular than you need, because the more granular it is, the harder it's going to be to maintain.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are all great tips. Thank you for sharing that, Doug.
Happy to. It's been something that's hugely successful, and it's great to be able to share that adventure with people.
Leading change is one of the core skills we must acquire, but it is only one of the steps towards our success as Scrum Masters. Tomorrow, on Success Thursday, we will talk about how to define success for the Scrum Master role. We'll cover tips on how to measure your way to that position, and most importantly, how to develop that focus on continuous improvement that is as important for Scrum Masters as it is for teams. See you tomorrow. We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.